Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Beijing's retaliation against EU tariffs on PRC electric vehicles has begun as what could result in a full-blown trade war between the massive trade partners takes shape. Yesterday, Tuesday, the Ministry of Commerce announced that as of this Friday, quote, importers of brandy originating in the EU will have to put down security deposits, mostly ranging from 34.8% to 39% of the import value, end quote, as part of anti-dumping penalties. Pork was in the crosshairs too, with the Ministry of Commerce announcing that the, quote, anti-dumping and anti-subsidy investigations launched on certain pork and pork byproducts, dairy products and other items imported from the European Union, end quote, is underway. China claims the costly beverages are dumped on the Chinese market, sold cheaper than the cost price to undercut local competition, but lobby group Spirits Europe says it has been transparent with Beijing, and its, quote, evidence provided clearly demonstrates the absence of dumping, end quote, or even the potential for it. Indeed, most commentators agree that this is clear retaliation for EU tariffs on Chinese EVs, an industry for which there is clear evidence of strong state subsidies. Despite this, the zeitgeist in Beijing has taken these EV tariffs and transformed them into something much more existential. Jian Junbo, Deputy Director of the China-EU Relations Research Center at Fudan University and the Deputy Secretary-General of the Shanghai Europe Studies Association, for example, in a recent article argued, quote, the ultimate goal of protectionist measures against China is to maintain the EU's product, technology and economic advantages, maintain its high position in the global value chain, and maintain its dominant position in the global economic system, thereby maintaining the liberal international order based on rules and the core position of the West in the world. This is the essence behind the China-EU electric vehicle dispute, even if it is not the EU's most direct purpose, but it implies this casual relationship, end quote. Thus, through this view, European tariffs on Chinese EVs represent China's struggle with the West for dominance this century. One obvious pushback to this argument is that dozens of non-Western developing countries have also erected trade barriers against sectors similarly subsidized by Beijing. Another pushback from a European perspective could also be, you, China, have used state policies and protectionist measures to climb the value-added chain. We have the right to use state and protectionist measures to maintain our position in the value chain. Meanwhile, the same day, Beijing also announced that increasing import tariffs on large displacement fuel vehicles were being studied. This would especially hurt Germany, which actually voted against the recent EU tariffs. Volkswagen AG Chief Executive Officer Oliver Blume has said that any possible Chinese tariffs would be particularly risky for the German automotive industry and that the company would face significant disadvantages in the Chinese market. Brussels immediately hit back against the measures, announcing that it would bring a case against the tariffs at the World Trade Organization, with the European Commission in the statement expressing, quote, we believe that these measures are unfounded and we are determined to defend EU industry against the abuse of trade defense instruments, end quote. The same day, Paris accused Xi Jinping of breaking a promise he had made to French President Emmanuel Macron of not imposing temporary duties during a visit to Paris last May. France's junior trade minister, Sophia Prima, expressed, quote, I find these measures incomprehensible. There is no justification for them. We are very disappointed by this announcement, which goes against the commitment made by President Xi during his visit to France. I will soon be attending the G20 summit in Brasilia, where I will be taking the opportunity to hold a dialogue with my Chinese counterparts. I'm ready to go to China to put forward our positions, end quote. But EU officials speaking to UK-based The Financial Times said, quote, the Chinese response has been calibrated, adding that they believed Beijing did not want to initiate a tit-for-tat trade war that would hurt its exporters and cost jobs. An official reportedly told the outlet, quote, even with these tariffs, Chinese EVs will still be sold in Europe. It's not like the US, which effectively closed its market, end quote. Next up, yesterday, Tuesday afternoon, PRC Premier Li Qiang chaired a symposium with economic experts and entrepreneurs and held a State Council study session on the economy. The symposium was to, quote, hear opinions and suggestions on the current economic situation and future economic work, end quote. Li told the group that, quote, we should promptly implement the package of incremental policies to stabilize the economy, accelerate the implementation of policies already introduced to ensure early landing and early results, and quickly develop specific plans for policies under study. We should track and evaluate the transmission efforts of policies, optimizing and strengthening them where necessary. At the same time, in conjunction with planning next year's economic work, we should study and reserve a bunch of policy measures to stabilize the economy and promote development, and introduce them in a timely manner according to changes in the economic situation. The key to stabilizing the economy is to stabilize enterprises. We must effectively assist enterprises in alleviating difficulties, guide localities to make good use of various preferential policies for enterprises, resolutely tackle issues such as arbitrary fines, inspections, and seizures, end quote. Now, regular viewers will remember a few weeks ago we covered a senior official, Zhou Tianyong, warning against the arbitrary detention of business people and entrepreneurs in some parts of the country by local governments under acute fiscal strain, essentially for ransom. The official warned that if the issue was allowed to spread, it could devastate the national economy. The fact that this has been discussed in this meeting at the highest levels and included in the readout suggests that this is seen by Beijing as a significant problem. The original article shedding light on this issue was called Urgently Prohibit and Stop Local Governments from Supplementing Fiscal Revenue by Detaining Private Entrepreneurs and Releasing Them for Money, and was quickly censored after publication. Officials at Tuesday's National Development and Reform Commission meeting warned local governments against, quote, illegally imposing fines, carrying out random inspections or seizing assets, end quote, and stressing the need to create a, quote, positive environment for the private sector, end quote. The comments came as analysts have projected the central government would need to lift this year's fiscal budget ratio above the current 3% proportion to gross domestic product, as sluggish land sales and declining tax revenue have widened the deficit, according to estimates by Zhang Deli, chief macro researcher at Zhongtai Securities. Taking into account the sharp fall in land sales, traditionally local government's biggest source of extra budgetary revenue, actual revenue this year could be 3.4 trillion yuan, about $500 billion less than what was budgeted. Zhu Qibing, chief macro analyst at Bank of China International China, in a note this week observed, quote, we should not expect too much from follow-up fiscal policy this year. The key to fiscal policy this year lies in the easing of fiscal constraints rather than an increase in stimulus. We believe that local government debt risk is still a constraint on fiscal expansion to a certain extent, end quote. Next up, we return once more to the economy and we look at the link between the stock market, which appears to already be fizzling out, and the real economy. But just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode, I have a huge favor to ask. That is just to like, and if you have not done so already, subscribe. It's just 2 clicks of the mouse, but it's a tremendous help for me and the channel. This channel growing allows me to continue producing these episodes free and open for all 6 days a week, and I want to keep it that way. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links is also in the description for those who want to go the extra mile and help me keep the channel financially sustainable. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Next up, this year's National Day holiday followed the announcement of a slew of policies aimed at stabilizing growth, which significantly boosted the Hang Seng Tech Index and the Hang Seng China Enterprises Index last week, as well as the CSI 300 in the mainland the week before. On the market reopening yesterday, the rally was more cooled as investors were disappointed in the lack of details from Beijing on fiscal stimulus. In trading today, as of filming, which is about midday China time, the market, the CSI 300, is down 6%. The Hong Kong Hang Seng Index is also down over 10% over the last 2 trading days. Nevertheless, since the rally began, the CSI 300 still remains up about 30%. The next few days will be critical to see whether there is still some life in this rally or whether it will continue to fizzle out, costing investors potentially trillions of yuan. Today, Chinese financial media outlet Caixin published an article discussing whether enthusiasm in the stock market over the holiday was reflected in household consumption and investment demand, as seen in 3 dimensions: property sales, tourism, and consumption growth. We quote some selected excerpts from the piece, in translation from Chinese, directly. Property. The Politburo meeting held on September 26 called for measures to halt the decline in real estate sector, including further loosening of restrictions on home purchases. Soon after, the 4 first-tier cities of Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Beijing announced policy changes. Real estate developers also boosted their promotional activities, adjusted loan conditions, and adopted flexible pricing strategies in a bid to stimulate market demand and reduce their inventories. In early October, new and second-hand property sales improved compared to the previous month. Sales of newly built properties in 60 major cities rose by 1.1% year-on-year from October 1st through October 5th, according to financial data provider Wind Information Co. Limited. That's compared with a year-on-year decline of 28.4% in the selected cities in September. However, sales in smaller cities among the 60 contracted even further in the period compared with the month before. Sales of second-hand properties shot up by 164.3% year-on-year across 26 selected cities in the 5-day period, rebounding from a 6.3% decline in September. Sales in the first 4-tier cities soared by 173.8% in the first 5 days of October, from an uptick of 1.8% from the whole of September, while those in second and third-tier cities saw sales shift from decline to increase. Tourism. Travel volume hit a record high over the week-long holiday. Data from the Ministry of Transport showed that the total number of trips taken via railway, road, waterway and aviation reached about 1.46 billion from October 1st through 5th. The average number of trips taken each day increased by 24%, compared to the same 5-day period in 2019, surpassing the increase recorded during this year's Mid-Autumn Festival holiday in September. Inbound travel during the period increased year-on-year, according to online travel agency chinaupdatechannel Inc. That could be attributed to factors such as the expansion of China's visa-free policies. Popular inbound destinations included Guangzhou, Xi'an, and Zhangjiajie. In terms of outbound travel, there was a significant increase in visits by mainland tourists to Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. According to online travel operator Trip.com Group Limited, most outbound tourists during the holiday chose short-distance trips. Data from Tunar.com indicate that the top cities for outbound travel were all within a 5-hour flight distance, such as Hong Kong, Bangkok, Seoul, and Osaka. Consumption. Tourism spending during this holiday was characterized by travelers looking for more bang for their buck. Stimulus policies announced on the 24th of September had a limited impact on tourists' consumption, although bookings for domestic flights and hotels on the first day of the 7-day holiday increased by 17% and 40% respectively. Prices for corresponding services fell by 23% and 4.5%. Big-ticket items like cars showed signs of recovery, possibly reflecting improvements to consumer sentiment and the effect of policies such as the nationwide vehicle trade-in program. Here ends the direct quote. Now, on this theme, I wanted to end with this observation from Xu Gao, chief economist at Bank of China International. Quote, "The stronger-than-expected monetary easing will significantly boost market sentiment, but whether it can help stabilize real economic growth remains to be seen, as accomplishing that goal will depend on the fiscal easing policies that come out. Because of the liquidity provided by the central bank's new structural policy tools, such as the swap program, the domestic stock market could rise somewhat independently of the real economy. Regulators must do more to prevent this increased liquidity from creating a bubble." End quote. We will be watching this space very closely as we move into the coming weeks. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Wednesday, and I will see you all tomorrow.